Hi, this is Dr. Nicki Newton. I am excited to be here with you talking today about the critical areas in kindergarten. We're going to look at each of those areas, and I'm going to be demonstrating different things and ways to teach those critical areas. Basically, what you need to know is that in kindergarten, counting and cardinality is a critical area. I can't stress that enough. Counting and cardinality only takes place in kindergarten, and kindergarten is a non-compulsory grade in most states. And in some states, even if it is compulsory, it's half day. And in many states where they do kindergarten, it's half day. So we have compulsory standards in a non-compulsory grade. You really have to work on counting and cardinality. It doesn't really come up as a domain in any other grade. And those concepts, it's pretty much assumed that the kids have them and then are ready to build on them. So spend your time in kindergarten on counting and cardinality. There is some stuff around operations and algebraic thinking, the fluency level through 5, and the basic understanding of the basic 4 story types is also a critical area. There's a little bit of measurement stuff, not that much, really looking at kind of non-standard units of measure. And then geometry. Geometry is a critical area in every grade level, and in kindergarten is where it starts. Kids have to know a lot more now than a circle is a circle. And so with that, we're going to just start looking at the different critical areas, and I'm going to give you hopefully lots of really great ideas on how to teach them. All right, the first thing we're going to start talking about is number writing. Number writing is really important in kindergarten. It's one of the critical areas. You should have a number writing center set up all year long and just increase the range of numbers that kids are writing and keep it, fun all year long. Have the kids think about the multiple intelligences and have them writing numbers kind of from that framework. So they would be writing them with bodily kinesthetic ideas in mind, with spatial ideas. Kids would be painting numbers. The Play-Doh is bodily kinesthetic, so in this center they sit down and they do Play-Doh numbers. I always put a green dot so they know where to start and a red dot so they know where to stop, and I put arrows that indicate the direction they should be making the number in. There's a really good website, Math Their Way, that has tons of number writing ideas if you look in their newsletter. I forget which newsletter exactly it is, but it's one of the first, within one of the first 5 newsletters, they talk about number writing. I want to say it's newsletter number 4 or 6, but I'm not sure which one. But anyway, there's tons of number writing ideas on there, and they talk about kids writing in the sand and so forth. Here's another really good idea. The kids love this idea. What you do is you draw the number with the arrows. I always put a green dot and a red dot, and then I go to the 99-cent store and I get vehicles, airplanes, cars, all that kind of stuff. And then in the center, the kids just have to fly or ride whatever the vehicle is around the number. And sometimes we call it race car numbers or airplane numbers or whatever you want to call it. And that's just the center that the kids go. And oftentimes when they're doing it, they'll say whatever poem goes with that number so that they can engage in the practice. The point is you want a number writing center. Number writing is one of the critical areas in kindergarten. One of the next critical areas in kindergarten is counting and cardinality. You want your kids to be able to know how much is in a set. And one of the best things to use is 5 frames. The kindergarten standard is 5, fluency within 5. So I use 5 frames, and I use just colored stickers on the frames, and I'll ask kids, how much do you see? Ask them really quickly, and then they have to tell me, oh, I see 3 and 0. Oh, I see 2 and 2, and that makes 4. Oh, I see 1 and 1 and 1, and that makes 3. Oh, I see 1 and 2, So I use different colors. There's all this theory around what colors do in terms of kids and helping them to learn. And so I use a lot of colors, and once you finish with the 5 frames in kindergarten, you're going to go next to the 10 frames and do the same kind of thing. How many do you see? How many are there? How many are missing? How many more to make 10? All of that is part of the critical areas in counting and cardinality. And so you want to make sure that you're doing that kind of stuff with your kids. And then the next area that you're doing is you're going to be doing a lot of getting kids to compare numbers. And so to do that, I'll throw a dice. And I got 6. This is a double dice. We're using outside number only. And then they have to actually make 6 out of, remember, you always want to go concrete, pictorial, abstract. So if they're comparing numbers, one person rolled 6, so they have 3 and 3, and then the other person rolled 1, and then they compare. Okay, I had 5 extra. These two match up, and then they don't have any on that side. And when you're first starting out, you might have the kids just pick a color. So if they, you know, maybe I'm red and then I put all my markers in red, maybe my partner is brown, they put their markers in brown, so that we can see that there is one less, right? We can say there's one less brown and one more red. Remember, you want to use that language. You want to emphasize that vocabulary. I don't only use Unifix cubes and Snap cubes, though. The Common Core says that kids will understand comparing numbers by matching, so that was concrete. Now, I use these little mosaics. I love the mosaics because the mosaics allow you can glue them down, and so then you have an artifact that the kids can take home and so forth to show the difference in numbers. So here we're comparing numbers and we're doing it. This is concrete, but if we glued it down, it would be pictorial, a representation. And then here's a representation. Here's where the kids would draw, right? So they would roll and then they would draw. They'd roll the dice and somebody got 4 and somebody got 2 and they match it up and then this person has 2 more. So you definitely want to do stuff like that. I also have lots of little animals and things that I collect. You can get them again at the 99-cent store, at the teacher store. They're just counters. You can use different kinds of counters. These counters are farm animal counters, and so how many chickens, how many cows. So do we have more chickens or more cows, and how many more? I just want to show you that there's lots of different things that you should use when you're comparing. Concrete, pictorial, right, and abstract. So when I get to abstract, I use number lines, and then what I have the kids do is they will indicate on the number line. They might jump. Oh, I rolled a 4 and you rolled a 7, so you rolled more than I did. Or sometimes they circle. I rolled a 4 and you rolled a 7, whose number's further along the number line, right? This would be much more abstract. And then finally, the kids actually just are playing, you know, compare games where I use Uno cards a lot because Uno cards are really colorful. So one person will roll a 2, or, you know, pick a 2, and one person will pick a 4, and what we'll do is we'll use the number line, and they'll kind of line them up to see, oh, well, who rolled more? The person that rolled 4 more is because 4 came after 2, right? So this is a scaffold to getting kids just to play with the number line. All right, so that's counting and cardinality. Really important. You want kids using that 5 frame to know how to do that stuff. The next thing that is a critical area in kindergarten is modeling and solving simple join and separating problems. Now, remember, in kindergarten, there are 4 types of word problems. And the first type of word problem is add 2, result unknown. So that's when you say Susie had 2 apples, Johnny gave her 3 more. How many does she have, you know, all together now? And so that's the first kind of story. That's called a result unknown story, okay? And then I'll use different maps to show that. Susie had 2 apples, Johnny gave her 3 more. Now, how many do they have all together? Okay, so that is a join, result unknown story, first kind of kindergarten story that children are supposed to know. The next kind of story that kids are supposed to know are the takeaway stories. And so this is the stories where you say, Susie had 5 apples. She gave 2 to her brother. How many did she have left over? You put the leftover ones here, and then they see, oh, she has 3 left over. She had 5. She gave away 2. She has 3 left over, right? And so you want to use maps and things to help kids organize their thinking. That's a takeaway story. The result is unknown. It's really important in kindergarten that as you're telling these stories either the join stories or the takeaway stories, that you name them for the kids. You say, oh, today we're doing join stories. Oh, today we're doing takeaway stories. And we don't know what happened at the end. That's what the research says. Remember, the research says that teachers should name the type of story that they're doing. There are two other type of kindergarten stories. One is called a part whole story. And so you might use a 5-frame, and you might use colors for that. So you might say, Susie has 2 yellow buttons and Susie has 3 red buttons. How many does she have all together? That would be a part whole story. And I use the 5-frame. It helps kids to see exactly what they're doing. And then the fourth type of kindergarten story is how many ways. So those are stories where you say, Susie had some red and some green apples. She had 4 apples. Some were red and some were green. How many were red and how many were green? And then what you have the students do is the students actually draw out the combinations. So they say, well, she could have had 1 red and she could have had 3 green, right? Or she could have had 2 red and she could have had 2 green, or she could have had 3 red and she could have had 1 green, or she could have had 4 red and she could have had no green, right? There's other ways. She also could have had 4 green and no red. So there's lots of different combinations. You'd have the kids draw all those combinations out. Eventually, in kindergarten, you would want them to be able to make a table. She had 4 and 0, 3 and 1, and so forth. And so those are the 4 types of kindergarten stories. So I said that there is a part whole, there's both add-ins unknown, which is this last story we did, there's add to, and there's takeaway, and both of those are the result unknown. 4 types of stories that the Commons Core says are really important for kids to know. Now, again, I use a lot of counters when I'm telling the stories. I always use these 5-frames. And what I did with this 5-frame, I got this idea actually from Christine Mulgrave, is I just put magnets on it. And the reason I put magnets on it is because then I can hold it up and I can do all kinds of stuff, with it in that way. You can just put magnets on the whiteboard as well, but there's a magnet on the counter and there's a magnet on the frame. Okay, so that's one way, and you're going to want to definitely tell stories. Okay, and then the final area of emphasis for kindergarten is geometry. Remember, geometry is the only domain that is a critical area in every grade. And in kindergarten, students are supposed to understand geometric ideas and use them and think about their shape, the orientation, and the spatial relationships like flips, slides, and turns, which is really interesting because we used to not do that until like 2nd grade. So, you're going to, of course, have pattern blocks, but you also need attribute blocks. And the kids are just going to do all kinds of work with the pattern blocks and the attribute blocks. You want kids to be able to identify them. So you'll do things like, which one is the triangle, which one is the square. You want them to be able to name them. So you want to say things like, I'm thinking of a 3-sided shape, and the kids should say, oh, that's a triangle. And you want kids to be able to describe them. Oh, the triangle has 3 sides. Also in the Common Core, as part of the critical area, kids are supposed to know 3D shapes. And there's 4 that are named. They're supposed to know cubes, cones, spheres, and cylinders. So cubes, cones, spheres. My sphere has rolled off the table. So spheres and cylinders. So those are the ones that you want kids to know, and you just do a lot of work around those. To make riddles out of this. Make a game where you're telling kids riddles. Oh, I'm thinking of a shape and it looks like a orange, or I'm thinking of a shape and it looks like a Pepsi can, or whatever it might be. So you want the realia, and you want kids building shapes. And so you also want to use Play-Doh. Play-Doh, bring Play-Doh back, because you can say things to kids like, oh, I want you to make a sphere, and then they have to make it out of the Play-Doh. Oh, I want you to make a cylinder, and then they have to make it out of the Play-Doh. It's one thing to be able to recognize it. It's another thing to be able to make it, because then you really learn to concentrate and to think about the attributes of that shape. So those are the critical areas for kindergarten. I hope this has been helpful and informative. Be sure to check out my blog, because there's lots more activities that you can do to teach those critical areas. Thank you.